Hello everyone, Damien Ruffner here from Audubon, Pennsylvania and the Discovery Center in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, here to bring you more of the Flying High Virtual Education Series. Today we're going to be discussing Birds of the Delaware River, Part 2.
In a previous Flying High episode, we learned what a watershed is and why the Delaware River is part of such an important watershed. We also learned some of the many species of bird that occur in the Delaware River watershed, particularly birds that make their summer homes in some of the many forests that exist in the area. Today, we're going to learn about several more species of bird that occur in the watershed. But the birds we're going to discuss today are species that use the rivers, streams, marshes, and other habitats that contain water.
Now, watersheds contain many different types of habitats, but the actual habitats that create a watershed are rivers, creeks, streams, and bays.
Creeks and streams are smaller bodies of flowing water that are created when water begins to seep out of the ground from water that exists deep underground. We call the areas where underground water comes to the surface to form a creek or stream the headwaters. But when underground water flows out of the ground and it forms a large body of flowing water, we call that body of water a river. And when some rivers flow into the ocean, they widen to form an even larger body of water called a bay. Within the Delaware River watershed, the Delaware River widens to the Delaware Bay before it flows into the Atlantic Ocean. One type of bird that occurs in marshes and wetlands of the watershed is the northern harrier. This large raptor, which was once called the marsh hawk, can be found in other areas within the watershed that have low vegetation but lack wet soil, like meadows and farms. The harrier is unusual. It does not build its nests high in the trees or on tops of tall buildings or bridges like other raptors. Instead, the harrier builds its nest right on the ground in low, dense vegetation. There are many species of birds in the watershed that swim in bays, rivers, and other bodies of water, but most common swimming birds are ducks. 25 species of ducks occur in the watershed, and some, like the American black duck, eat plants and other types of food items that can be found at or near the water's surface. But some species, like the ruddy duck, get their food by diving below the water's surface in order to find underwater plants and invertebrates. American black ducks and ruddy ducks both occur on large lakes and rivers, but they tend to occur in the Delaware River watershed mainly during the winter. There are also many kinds of swimming birds in the watershed that eat fish, including the great cormorant. While cormorants are not ducks, like many ducks, they dive underwater in search of fish, which they grab with their long, narrow bills. Within the watershed, the great cormorant occurs mainly on the Delaware River, along with another type of cormorant called the double-crested cormorant. As long as there's lots of fish in the Delaware River, there are plenty of food for these cormorants and other types of fish-eating birds. Another bird that eats fish is the belted kingfisher. But this bluish-gray, black and white bird with a large head and bill does not capture fish by swimming and diving. Instead, kingfishers dive into the water from high up in the air in order to grab fish swimming just at or below the water's surface. At the southern end of the watershed, where the Delaware River expands to form the Delaware Bay, there are many marshes along the bay as well as sandy beaches, and these areas are used by a number of species of birds that only occur in these habitats. One is the salt marsh sparrow. This small, colorful sparrow lives in the dense grasses that grow in salt marshes along the edge of the Delaware Bay, where it feeds on insects and seeds. The last bird we are going to discuss today is a species that occurs along the shores of the Delaware Bay, but not in the marshes. This species, called the red knot, is a type of sandpiper that uses sandy beaches along the edge of the bay. Red knots only show up at these beaches during the spring and fall when they are migrating between their breeding areas in the Arctic and their wintering areas, which extend in the U.S. south to the southern tip of South America. Because red knots migrate such long distances, they need places during their journey to stop, rest, and feed. And some of the most important resting places for the red knot in the world are the beaches of the Delaware Bay. Today, we've talked about some of the birds that can be found around the creeks and streams, rivers, bays, marshes, and beaches within the Delaware River watershed. But there is so much more we can learn about these birds and the many other species of birds that occur within the watershed. If you'd like to learn more about these birds and the birds discussed in the previous lessons, please visit Audubon, Pennsylvania's website and search for Delaware River Watershed.